Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave, and I'm joined here with my co-host. His name is Greg. What up, Greg? How are you? You weird-looking dude.
I am fantastic. Thank you for that. I'm doing
kidding.
pretty good, man. Busy.
I'm in a mood.
Busy. Well, yeah, Dave, are you you're in a good mood?
I don't know. It's just a mood, right?
Remains to be seen. Yeah. That's right. Interesting. We're kind of going to be talking about that a little bit today. I almost decided what your mood was because of the stories that I was telling myself.
Oh.
So, Dave, I got to be honest. We always talk about books here.
Yeah.
Like ad nauseum, really. But it's funny because I'm reading two books, and I say reading with quotations because I'm actually listening to them. But I think you would love both of these, and it's going to really tie into the subject that we're talking about today. And one is James, and the other one is Grendel. So they're actually two books about really famous works of literature. So the Grendel one is based on Beowulf, and Beowulf's this great epic story about a hero, and Grendel's the monster. And this story is Grendel's point of view, and it's like Freud's devouring mother, and like the way he was treated, the way he was brought up, and how he knows what he knows. It's
are you reading that in like tribute to Wicked, because it's like from the Wicked Witch's point of view?
So no, but it's funny. Like, as I was going to ask you if you have any other examples of this kind of stuff, because I really love it. And James is Huck Finn, but from Jim's. So it's really cool. It's all very cool. And we understand the concept that there's two sides to every story, right? Everyone knows that, but we don't really live that way at all. I think always in my own life, and I can't really speak for you, Dave, but when I have to figure something out, or I'm going to do something, or if I have a big thing coming up, like a new job or something, I always lean towards the negative. And the positive, I think, like, if you're leaning towards the worst case scenario, the best case scenario is just as likely. But for whatever reason, we're always leaning negative here. So we talked about in the past about Seven Deadly Sins. We talk about urban legends. We talk about all these stories that impact our lives so much in our behavior. But we fail to sort of mention the most important thing, and that's the stories that we tell ourselves, right?
Yeah. I often will share that with people that, like, we're just kind of wired to see the negative a lot of times, or to focus in on the negative. And I was sharing that with someone, and they took it as like a scientific fact. And I was like, no, I'm kind of just like saying a generalization.
Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah, well, I wonder where that comes in like the brain. And I'm like, no, it's like a generalization. But like, for the most part, we tend to like just gravitate towards the negative. But that's that anxiety, right? That's the anxious thinking. Yep.
Yeah. Survival.
So, we did a whole episode about cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
A whole episode.
Big one. Yeah.
It was a whole episode of our lives.
Popular one.
I guess. For some. And, I think that we touched on some of the things we're going to talk about today, but I just want people to understand the reason why we're going back and doing this all over again is because we just scratched the surface. We did a few of it, like the ones that we felt were prominent. And we're talking about cognitive distortions, of course, which are, Greg, go ahead. You can take a stab at it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you put me on the spot here. So a cognition is a thought. I think we can all agree there, right, Dave? I think that's something we're all agreeing there.
Yep.
And I love that when like a word really kind of is perfect for a situation. And distortion is a perfect word for this, because to distort means to alter or twist. And, to take something and remove it from its normal original position.
Okay.
So like a thought, you twist and alter it, and it's not what it is anymore, right? It's not just this benign thought anymore. It's something different.
So, Greg, when we were talking about this, one of the ways that I was sharing that I sometimes will explain this cognitive distortion to people is to pretend that we're looking at life through Instagram. And when we're taking a photo of something in Instagram, we get to the screen where we have the option to add a filter. And think of the cognitive distortions as the different filters. So each one changes the way we view the photo. The photo never changes, only the filter changes. But with each filter change, we can get a different emotion from each, relayed to the photo. Mm-hmm. It could be a black and white, could be very dramatic, while a sepia tone might be more vintage vibes, right?
Okay, so yeah. A bit more romantic, in my opinion.
Maybe. And then, you have like your brighter ones that, will make it pop a little bit more. So each filter adds something without changing what we're seeing at all. And that's what our brain does. So when we go down this list of cognitive distortions, which there is a good amount, each of these is like a filter that, because the situation is never going to change. And the thing that I like really try to emphasize to people is we're all going to look at the same exact scenario, but feel differently. And as we know from cognitive behavioral therapy, the way you interpret a situation or the way you view it and think about it is going to determine how you feel, your emotions.
Yeah. And if you notice that, like that, certain thoughts or the way you're looking at things is really kind of getting you down. It's like, I often tell people to sort of become a lawyer for yourself. I think that's the best way to approach these sometimes, because if you can, you're thinking, oh, this person, looked at me this way, they don't like me, or you mess up once at your job and you're like, man, I should have never really got into this profession or anything like that. And if you can become a lawyer for yourself and kind of look at all different angles of it and try to disprove the thought that is making you feel like crap, then I think that's always a pretty good approach.
Yeah.
Should we talk about like where these kind of how they were developed, or should we just kind of get into them? I think it's
so. Why don't you explain a little bit of the history around these cognitive distortions, and maybe that will help give people a better understanding of what these are or where they came from.
Okay, so as far as I could gather, there's three really important people when it comes to developing these, filters, as you call them, which I think is perfect actually, because you can almost like it's almost like a kaleidoscope. You could put it in front of your eye, and then if you shift it a little bit, that's changing it, and then things look completely different. I think a filter is a great way to put it. But it's Beck, Ellis, and David Burns, right? So Beck we obviously talked quite a bit about him when we talked about CBT, and his model, he's coming right after, not right after, but after Freud, and maybe a couple decades after Freud. And he's essentially saying that Freud wants you to look at your thoughts, and psychoanalyst wants you to look at your thoughts and say like, oh, these are important. What do they mean about you? What do they mean about you? And Beck's kind of like, well, what if they're wrong and they don't mean anything? And that's kind of the approach he's kind of taking. Like, what if like we have these automatic thoughts that are telling us and making us feel a certain way and telling us something about ourselves that's just not true. So that's where he's coming from. And then Ellis comes along. He's actually maybe a contemporary with Beck, sort of the same ideas, but he came up with this ABC method, which I really love. And that's the ABC method, simply put, is there's something that happens, and then there's a way that you think about it, and then there's a consequence of that. So if I, hear a sound coming down the stairs right now, and I'm like, oh my God, it's someone in the house that shouldn't be here, then I feel completely frightened. But I could take that thought and I could change it a little bit. I could be like, oh, pizza's here, or something like that. Like, or
I wonder who this could be.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So and you shift that one little thought, and like you're saying before, the action or the event doesn't change at all. It's just the way you think about it and the way you look at that event completely change the way you feel. And not only the way you feel, the way I'm going to react to it. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like really, really, really interesting. And that's why it is important to talk about this again. And Beck had this student who we're a fan of, maybe before more than now, but I'm still a fan of him. And David Burns writes a book, Feeling Good, and he takes it to the mainstream. And Beck and Ellis, they didn't have a list of cognitive distortions like he did. He just had this they just both had this idea that like the automatic thoughts were leading people to think negatively. And David Burns comes along and popularizes 10 very specific cognitive distortions. And Burns, it's funny, Dave, because sometimes we talk about how you can't just be one kind of therapist. I suppose that's true unless you're David Burns, because I don't think he's anything but CBT.
Yeah, he's very CBT. Why did you say maybe not as much of a fan now as before?
Well, I say that because he's kind of closed-minded when I've heard two separate therapists be on his podcast who I kind of really admire. One being Stephen Hayes with ACT, and he ripped Stephen Hayes to shred. And I think for good reason, because it was a little too heady. And I will always respect and think David Burns is probably the best CBT. He's like literally the guru of CBT for the world right now. I mean, literally becoming a student of the creator. But I don't know. Maybe he's a little too close-minded. I don't know. Because CBT, honestly, CBT doesn't work with everyone.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
Wow, that's a professional right there. Dave, this month for BetterHelp, it's all about gratitude. And I'm curious, is there anyone you're specifically thankful for this month besides me?
Nope, just you and Michael J. Fox.
Okay, good.
It can be really hard to remember to take a moment to be grateful, but it's incredibly important. We're so used to seeing what's wrong with the world, and gratitude helps us see what is right.
It's very optimistic of you, Dave. But you're right, of course. In our brains, the negative screams and the positive just whispers. So it's helpful to give optimism a little bit of a voice.
I think that was a direct quote from Moses right there, actually, right?
One of our favorites.
It sounds like it. With BetterHelp therapists, we can be reminded to live life based on preference instead of fear and negativity. BetterHelp is giving us a better approach to life.
Yeah, and we don't have to tell all of you that we're huge fans of therapy. And BetterHelp is a great way to bring it to more people. So if you're ever thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic idea. It's entirely online and convenient. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a therapist. And remember, if it's not a good fit, you're going to get a switch for free.
Such a great option,
It really is.
So Dave, visit betterhelp.com/nothing today to get this 10% off your first month.
Bada bing, bada boom. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/nothing. And that's it. Peace. Well, you got to, it depends on the person. See, I don't know that they would say it does either, because if you're not prepared to do the work, then you're not going to be able to do it. So that's obviously always going to be a thing that's, because you have to go in there being ready to do the work if you do it his way, because there's like homework.
It's like almost like a contract in the beginning where it's like, if you're not, so he's not going to pull someone out of, like, that person has to really want to change. So I don't know if he's going to help someone who's like manic. I don't know if he's going to help someone with personality disorders often.
Yeah.
Like maybe like a borderline. I don't think that's going to work.
But you know what, Greg? Neither of us will ever have to worry about knowing if it works for everyone, because we are not going to use it for everyone, and we are not ever going to do fast action therapy.
And we're never,
for the most part.
Yeah, like David Burns saying, you got 2 hours because I'll fix your whole life.
Yeah.
Like, wow. That's
or like good. How many weeks do their session, their programs usually run? It's like
8
a week. Yeah. And we're like 8 years.
How about 8 years? Buckle up.
Yeah.
Let's get to know each other.
I want to talk about that later. So hopefully we'll remember at the end. But yeah, no, I was a big fan of David Burns. I still am. I just have been, I feel like that was like a period of time where we were very excited. And if anybody has been listening to us for a long time, clearly our excitement shifts over time and we get excited about other things. So I don't think it's not like on my end, I don't think it's a lack of appreciation for him. It's just more of like, there's been other things that have come up that have also caught the attention. So with that being said, though, we can get into this list. I will just say that when you hear this list, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I do that one. Oh yeah, I do that one too. Oh wait, I do all of these. And guess what? Most of us do. Or you might say, I do like 8 out of 10, or I do 5 out of 10. That's totally common. Nobody does just one. That is not the way this works. And that's not the purpose of this. And the purpose isn't really even to keep count. It's more just about understanding yourself. I think it's usually introduced in a way that you like get the person to see all the different ways that they have negative thought patterns or distorted thought patterns, and just for them to see it, and that can be a little shocking for them, or can kind of, I think it also kind of like, I don't know if you had this feeling, but it's like, wow, they understand me. I do that all the time. And like you get that like feeling like, wow, I feel understood, or I feel like they know how I think.
And I think like people seeing something written on a piece of paper, or you bring this up to someone, makes them feel understood and makes them feel kind of seen. And not they. I know when I look at them and I say, "Oh yeah, that's me too." It's like it makes me feel not as alone.
Yeah. Oh, I could do yours actually.
No, you could.
Oh yeah, you couldn't do mine, could you?
I think I probably could. When we get to it, I'll probably, if I hear one that really strikes me.
I definitely know a few that would be yours. And it's cool because like I feel like this is also universal to age groups. I mean, I wouldn't use it with like 5-year-olds, but I have like some teenagers that I use this with, and they actually kind of like it because teens these days love labels. So when you label something, they gives them that thing to refer back to later. Like I have this one, I think he's like 14 or 15, and he'll say like, "Oh, I was doing that, whatever kind of thinking it was." He'll like actually say the label of it. He'd be like, "Oh, I was doing that again." So, and then we'll talk about how we reframe the thought to make it less impactful. So it's kind of cool when people actually like buy into it and they utilize the terminology.
Yeah, like my cognitive distortions are killing me today. Like something like that.
I'm trying to remember which one he like refers to. Oh, you know what? A lot of my patients will say like, "Oh, I was doing that all or nothing thinking again." So I just love when they come in and label it.
That might be like almost a catch-all. I think that would be like the only critique of mine, and we'll see as we go through this, is that I think sometimes the list of 10, and I've seen lists of 12 and 15, they can get a little redundant. Sometimes you're like, that's all.
There's a few that like, oh, I thought we already did this one. Yeah, for sure. All right. So getting into this list, the first one is magnification and minimization. And the definition we have for this one is exaggerating or minimizing the importance of events. So one might believe their own achievements are unimportant, or that their mistakes are excessively important. And a variation of that is catastrophizing, which is making, seeing only the worst possible outcomes of a situation, like making
a mountain out of a molehill, Dave.
Yeah.
That's what it's really.
Did you say a molehill?
Mole.
Oh, okay. I thought you said a molehill.
Nope, not a mole. So, what's for me in this one that I see quite a bit is people will discount the positive. And catastrophizing also is something that we're seeing, I think, a lot of after the election, right? Where it's like I'm hearing a lot of people saying like, well, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and it's basically over. And it's like, well, let's hold on. Let's see what happens. You'll get through this, and hopefully not much will change. Just last time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's some general topics that I think people are like rightfully upset about, especially, but then there's other things that I'm like, I don't know that that's going to be the outcome we're going to see here. So why don't we just like wait and see how that goes? Minimization, it might be that kid that gets really good grades, but yet they're like struggling in one course, and they just, that's all they tend to talk about is the one area where they're struggling. Someone who does really well in sports, and just like, that one time they didn't do well, they can't get that out of their head, and that's all they focus on is like the failure that they had or something like that.
I mean, you talk to, 8 people in one day, and you're trying your best to help them all in any way you can. And one of them you just couldn't reach. You just couldn't get the words right. You just couldn't find your way. And then that's the one you remember. You're
Yeah.
like, damn, I was off today. That's what you say to yourself. You might have had, and I'll show people like the times table, like say like 7 times 1, 7 times 2, 7 times 3, all the way down to 7 times 10, and like 7 times 3 will be like I'll write like 20 or something, and you'll they'll go right to that almost every single time. They'll be like, you got 7 times 3 wrong, and it's like, well, you didn't mention that I got the other 9 right. And I always I notice that in people, like we do sort of discount the positive all the time, and that stings.
I got a good example of this. So this one individual that I talked to, he's young. He's in his like mid-20s, and he's been taking care of his mom because his mom's been poor health for years now. He literally like has to stay with her all the time. He plans everything out. He goes with her everywhere. Um, and he will constantly talk about running into old friends from school and seeing their successes and feeling like he's a failure. He hasn't done much with his life. And the whole time he like describes his failures, he neglects to also explain all the responsibilities he's had that those individuals have not had to. And, sometimes I'll have to just remind him of like, think about all the responsibility. Think about all that you've had on your plate over the past few years. You've had no opportunity to go out and, do these things that your peers have. Like, how many people at like 25 years old are fully responsible of taking care of their moms? And then his dad too. His dad's not in great health too, and his dad moved in, and he's kind of there taking care of both of them. Like, how many 25-year-olds are doing that? So, it's kind of like minimizing what he's doing, or, he's putting his own status down because he's comparing himself to other people of his age and not kind of reminding himself that his scenario is different.
Absolutely.
I guess comparison is a big part of the minimization as well.
Comparison is the thief of joy. So, and
I thought that was you.
Oh, dude. No, and it's not even my quote. It's Teddy Roosevelt.
But
the thing is, you talked about Instagram. That's true. Comparison is the thief of joy. You start comparing yourself to other people's lives. Eek. So let's get on to the next one here. And this is kind of similar to one we're going to talk about, but overgeneralization, right? So you're making these broad interpretations from a single event. I notice it with people dating a lot, right? Where maybe you go on a date and this person, you don't really hit it off, and maybe you were a little awkward on the date, and they're like, and then the person's like, well, I never gonna really do well with dates because I'm awkward. Because you were awkward in that one scenario, you're awkward forever. Yeah. Or because that person really didn't get your vibe or didn't really like you guys didn't really match, I'm unlikable. It's just this thing of if you're awkward in one little scenario, that doesn't mean you're awkward all the time in every day of your life. So, I mean, I think that's kind of something that we definitely all do. And, before we move on real quick, I mean, just to bring this up on a personal note, our friend Jack, my son, is going through, like, I think what, seems to me a potential breakup with his like first real girlfriend. And so he's seeing like every little text, every little interaction is becoming very like, well, what did this mean? Well, what did that mean? Well, what did this mean? And it's like all these cognitive distortions.
Yeah. I was gonna say he's probably tapping into some other things here too.
Oh, absolutely, dude. He's running off the charts right now.
It's wild. Do you have a lot of people who read their text messages to you in session?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's like the greatest example of cognitive distortions, because when you hear someone read through their text messages to tell you about a situation or an interaction that played out, sometimes you hear it and you're like, I don't think I got that from what you just read.
Or they'll say it with a certain tone, and it's like, you're
like,
sure
now
that's the tone.
try it in a different tone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Make it a little more sing-songy and see how it feels.
Right. So that is great. And I love that, because what better way to like really have like a direct
These
conversation about it. Yeah. These are
words
like
written down. Yeah.
This is a great way to talk about it because this is something that actually played out and you have the written evidence of how it played out, and we can process that and kind of help see that maybe there's a different side to this.
Yeah, and Dave, we're both English, majors early on, and that's the beauty of English. You can't really get things wrong because you read a novel in a class, and then you just listen to everyone's interpretation because everyone else is getting something different.
Yeah,
right. And that's what's going on here, and we're trying to like let's lean towards the positive maybe a little bit if we can.
Yes, absolutely. I was just having another thought about how sometimes it can be very much the contrary too, but that's a totally different episode. Like when people gloss over things that it's like, wait a minute, you didn't catch that part? But yeah, that's a little different. That's actually maybe blinding yourself to something.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting one. Magical thinking.
Ooh.
So it's belief that something that I did is going to directly influence a completely unrelated situation. I guess it's in a way, it's kind of like that. If you say like, "Oh, I hope it doesn't rain," and then someone's like, "Why would you even say that?" And then it rains, as if like me saying that had like impact on the rain. But we're talking about obviously things that like I would do and then somehow blame it on something else. So you often hear this with like relationships or like even like parental relationships. Like, oh, if only I did this, then my mom would have been happier when I was growing up or something like that. If only I wasn't such a bad kid, or I didn't, give her so much grief, maybe she wouldn't have had the health issues that she had or something like that.
Yeah, and I almost think of OCD when I hear this one too, where a lot of people will be like, if I don't, like flick the light switch 3 times, then something might happen to my family or something like that.
Wow, did you just change OCD to the diagnosis name to magical thinking?
You're just magical thinking.
You specialize in anxiety and magical thinking disorder.
Yeah. Like someone's like, I think I have OCD. And I'm like, well, maybe you're magic. And that's way better.
Did you ever think about maybe you had magical thinking disorder instead?
Yeah. Hello, I'm the professional here. So
MTD. That's awesome.
So here's the next one, personalization. And this is very similar, I think. It's the belief that one is responsible for events outside of their own control. So I like to think about this in the way of like the just world fallacy, where people are like, if I behave a certain way all my life, then these bad things shouldn't be allowed to happen to me. And that's, that can get you into trouble.
I was actually going to that what you just said just reminded me of, I was like off air, I was going to tell you about an episode idea based on a book that I had read, because I read books once in a while.
Wow.
Yeah, no big whoop. But have you ever heard of the book, Why Do Good Things Happen to Bad People? Why do bad things happen to good people?
No, I haven't. But I think I know what it's about.
Well, it's actually like a book about religion and like God's existence and stuff like that. And that whole question of like, if God exists, why can bad things happen to good people? All that stuff. Isn't that kind of like personalization in a way though? That general thought that if I'm good, then nothing should happen to me. So if obviously I'm not good if something bad happened to me. Or
I think if nothing bad happens to you, you never have the opportunity to be good. I think, you know what I mean?
I guess.
Is that making any sense? Like I really do. And we talked about,
I don't think they're correlated, right?
Well,
being good and bad things happening, being good and bad or good
really
things
happening. No, they're really not.
I mean, there's natural consequences that are going to happen with any action, and we take the risk when we do any action, right?
Yeah.
But like, yeah. So I guess with this one, with personalization, I hear this one a lot. It's this idea that like that someone's the same kid I was telling you that like will come back and tell me about cognitive distortions. Yeah. He's been doing this thing with he's just starting to date, and he's got a tinge of magical thinking disorder, and he's been texting this girl, and it was going really well, and then she kind of asked him for space, and he doesn't understand why, because he's like, it was going so well, and it's been such a short period of time, and basically she's been saying things like, this timing is kind of bad right now, but like I definitely want to explore things in the future, but just it sounds like there's something going on in her life, and he keeps saying like, maybe she hates me and that's why she's saying this, or I must have done something so stupid that like she can't, like she doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I'm like, that's not what she said at all, actually. And like, I actually think if we look at what she's said to you so far, she's given you all the answers. I just think they're really hard answers to process, because we want like a more tangible answer. Like, what's going on in your life? Tell me right now.
Right.
She's not sharing that,
The other thing too is, though, maybe he might be picking up on something like that he doesn't want to acknowledge, right? And maybe he's looking for you for reassurance. But and I could be on an island here, but I think if someone asks for space, it's trouble.
Yeah, but so I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But this is something that was like short, young. I mean, you're young, but he even found some evidence. Like, she's literally told him, like, I have basically alluded to, like, there's stuff going on that like I got to focus on right now, and I really can't. I don't think it's fair to you, because I need to focus on those things. So right now isn't good, but I'd like to continue talking in the future.
Then he's going to give space.
And then he saw a social media post that she made about, hey, do you believe in finding the right person at the wrong time? And I'm like, dude,
that's a great sign.
And these two things like are your proof. Well, like, why are you thinking she hates? He actually said, like, maybe she hates me, and then this is this, and this is why. And I'm like, she at no point said she hates you. So we got to slow the train down a little.
This might be the one case where somebody asking for space is okay, because now from now on, if someone tells me that their partner asked for space out of them, and I say, I would ask them if they made a comment on social media like that, like some kind of like, hey,
check the social media,
the right person at the wrong time, and if that's not there, move on.
See, what I'm afraid is happening is he's overthinking it so much, he's going to do something that is going to cause her to be like, all right, forget it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm like really trying to help him reframe his thoughts here.
So it's like, you don't want to get in the weeds with your thoughts. So if someone asks for space, just got to give them space.
You just got to. You just got to. And if it happens, it happens. If they come back, that's why I said to him, I was like, just make her miss you, dude.
Make her miss you. That's the move. How's she going to miss you if you're there?
That's what I said. I was like, if you keep talking to her friend and her friend talks to her, or if you check in with her and just say, hey, how you doing? She's not going to ever get a chance to say, you know what? I totally miss him and I want to reach out to him.
Yeah, too much space.
Exactly. You know what we neglected to do as we've been doing this? It might be also helpful for us to talk about, or like just directly say how people can reframe. I think we've alluded to how, like, the way people can reframe each of these distortions, but we got to just make sure we touch on that. So with the personalization, I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. Like, a big one for me is like, let's find evidence to what is being said to you, or what makes you believe that you have some direct impact on this situation, so it's your fault. And a lot of the times they won't be able to provide that evidence, or they'll provide evidence that points to the contrary.
And then if they can find evidence for the way they are feeling, which they probably can, even if it's not good evidence, if you challenge them to also find evidence to the contrary, I think is what you're saying. That's the important thing, right? Yep. Find evidence both ways, right? And then let's talk about the worst case scenario. Let's talk about the best case scenario, and then like the most likely. Right? I mean, that's
the biggest thing with personalization. Is it is easier to blame ourselves or assume that we have some responsibility than it is to be able to settle on, I don't understand why this happened, or I don't know the answer to this. So we naturally point the blame back to ourselves. And that's just human nature, I think, in some ways. It's our instinct a little bit. When we don't have an answer, we assume we have some. So it's like when you can just remind yourself, like, this is why I'm doing it, and I have no real reason to actually believe that to be true. It can be helpful to reframe and then like come up with another thought. And maybe that thought is like, I just don't know the answer to it.
It is a comforting thought, though, to think that like the way you behave, it like returns to you, or even if people who kind of wrong you, that like sort of behavior will come back to get them. Like it's like a whole karma thing, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like there is some comfort to that.
A lot of times, though, people are utilizing it. So I do a lot of I used to do a lot of personalization. I've done a lot of work with like trying to, stop doing that, or at least limit or remind myself when I am. The biggest thing, though, is it's usually you put yourself down. It's like, it's just because I'm a piece of shit, or it's like just because like I'm not good, or I'm boring, and that's why they don't want to talk to me anymore, and that's why they don't call me anymore. And little do we think to like actually find the reason. That's the other thing, is sometimes it's a lack of communication. So another reason why people might personalize is it's easier to just blame yourself and assume that you're the problem than actually initiate that conversation and say, hey, this is what happened, this is how it made me feel. Can you provide some explanation on your end of like what exactly took place here, so I can better understand the situation?
Absolutely. And to kind of continue on with well, I was going to jump to conclusions, but I think that we all kind of understand jumping to conclusions, right? So like to basically interpreting the meaning of a situation with no evidence. So that's the biggest problem with cognitive distortions, is deciding that someone feels a certain way or decide that someone is behaving a certain way based on no evidence at all. It's essentially what
and there's two different variations of jumping to conclusions, right?
Yeah, let's talk about them. So my favorite is mind reading, because we all kind of think we can do it. We really do. So this is just interpreting the thoughts and beliefs others without adequate evidence, and that happens to people all the time.
You're a mind reader.
Am I a mind reader? You think this is mine?
That's one of them.
Hit me with it, though. I want to know why.
Why?
Yeah.
I think actually, no, jumping to conclusions, I would say. Maybe not mind reading, because I don't think you always think it's something that's your fault, but I think that the next one is fortune telling, which same thing, but kind of predicting the worst. Actually, yeah, you're more fortune telling probably than mind reader.
Okay. Do you have it? You must have some kind of example.
No, dude, just observations. That's what we do.
Why do you hate me? My magical thinking is telling me you hate me, and I don't like it, and now I'm uncomfortable and angry. But it's when someone, we keep it.
I do have a pretty good reason. I just don't want to say it on air.
Why is it bad?
No, it has to do with our job.
Oh, okay. You have to tell me off air if I remember. Yeah. So you ask someone on a date, Dave, and they literally tell you the truth. Like, no, I'm kind of like, just getting out of something, or, things are really busy.
That's what they always say when they hate me.
Right. Or I'm just ugly, or
all right, cool. I look like butt. Thanks.
Yeah. That's, you know what I mean? Like you literally hear what they say and you say, oh yes, yeah, no, I know. I am kind of a loser with a dead-end job, and like, you know what I mean? Like whatever. Like all like the biggest fears about yourself kind of like bubble right up into your head, and like that, it's almost like, what do I not want them to think about me, and then you assume that that's what they're thinking about you.
And I think I don't know about for you, but like a lot of them will be like, you'll relate it back to that, like something that bothered you about yourself, or something that maybe someone said one time, and you're just like, you draw it on all those insecurities, right? So
and it's when it matters too. So it's like, this is probably someone you want to like you.
Yeah.
And now that you've like sort of are using the distortions of mind reading and fortune telling, you're interpreting like their actions and their words incorrectly. So you're mad at them. And now you're not going to treat them the same way that you normally would. And you're going to create distance instead of bringing you closer, just because of this, the way you were thinking was completely wrong. Right. And it's doing the opposite of what you want. So it's almost like you have this choice where it's like, is this getting me closer to what I want or further away? And that's kind of a good way to get through it.
See, but this is the like what you said at the beginning about some of these kind of being redundant. This is where like personalization is very closely related to mind reading in some ways. Sure. All like most of these, if it comes back to something interpersonal, like about relationships, it's all about basically like lack of communication.
It is really, and you're right. There's a redundancy here because like it's like what mind reading, fortune telling, and then what's next? Like crystal balling and tarot
Yeah.
carding. Like what's? I mean, it's all kind of the same kind of thing.
Magical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's hit the next one because I think this one's something we all do, and it's no fault of our own. I think this is very biological.
Yeah. So we have emotional reasoning.
Mm.
So feeling like something is the way it is because of a way that like you are or something about you innately, I guess.
Well,
like,
even
or how
like
you feel.
you ever wake up in the morning and you feel anxious, or of course, right? Or you feel kind of down, and you don't just go like, "Oh, that's weird that I feel that way." You try to find a reason why you feel that way, and then you're like, "Oh, it must be because of." Like I'm struggling at work a little bit, or I got this thing coming up today. I didn't even realize how nervous I was about it. But it's like you can feel anxious and you can feel depressed. You can feel all these things without, having to dig in and find the absolute reason why. You can kind of like do the opposite and be like, oh, I'm feeling kind of down. Like, how can I, like, what can I do to change that mood? Like, what can I do to get out of this? Instead of like, how do I dig in more on it and like find the reason? And it just kind of keeps me there.
So like if I'm having like a day where I'm just like not in a good mood,
Yeah,
and then
clouds following you around.
something happens, like either like maybe I leave a little late, I'm rushing, I drop something, whatever. The first thought that comes to my head is like, oh, the whole day is going to be like this.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that I always say this to myself, everything that could go wrong is going to go wrong today. I just know it.
Yeah. And which is catastrophizing, because if you're saying that, you're like, oh, you're going to get like murdered today, because that would be on the list.
And then I minimize because along the way some things go right, or some things go as planned.
Discounting the positive along.
And I don't bother looking at those. Yeah. So a bunch of distortions are happening in that process.
Yeah.
Relationships. This is like a big one for relationships too, because when you have, especially if like in couples therapy, if you have one person who does emotional reasoning and the other one who's more of like that rational minded, maybe too rational minded, you're gonna have some conflict there.
Oh, and yeah, that's a huge conflict in relationships too, where it's like, someone will say something like, you feel this way about me, and it's like, oh, you can't tell me how I feel about you. Like that's, that you're putting, your thoughts on how you think I feel about you in my head. I see that all the time where people decide how someone else feels about them, and it makes them feel really bad,
And if everything is happening based on how you're feeling, and that other person is going to try to fix something for you. Mm-hmm. Nothing they're going to fix is going to change how you feel. So you're always going to have this conflict because they just don't understand you, right?
Yeah, no. And then there's a whole science to this where I don't know if we ever talked about the blue dot effect, Dave. Did we?
Nope.
Well, it's this thing where they did this study at Harvard, and they put a bunch of blue dots on a screen. And there was varying colors, purples and, whatever. And there was like, the tons of dots, but like only some of them are like blue. And they would ask all the people, how many blue dots do you see? And they would see 10, because that's how many there were. And then they would go back behind the scenes and they would change the color slightly. And so there would be about maybe 7 or 6 blue dots now. But they would ask the people again and they would still all see 10. And they would do this over and over again until there was essentially no blue dots, and then people were still seeing 10. And the point I'm trying to make here is our brains are designed to see what they're looking for. Like, so right. Like, if we want a goal or something, that's what's great about us. If we have like a goal or something, then we see the path to it. We can make it happen, and we can actively work towards that. But if we're seeing the world as like, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop, and we're always seeing what's negative, if we're looking for the negative, we're certainly going to find it. And that's like literally just how our brains are designed.
Yes. Speaking of that, our next one.
Okay.
So we kind of just alluded to this one. We have disqualifying the positive. Mm-hmm. Essentially, I mean, this one is super common. It's definitely something that I talk to people quite frequently about. You have 7 things go correct, 1 thing go incorrect, and that's all you can think about is that one thing that went wrong. You think about all the failures and none of the successes, and it just gets you caught up. You just feel you just never can appreciate where you're at if you're constantly thinking about that.
There's this comedian that I listen to, and he was talking about how when he's on the stage and everyone in the crowd is laughing and it's like it feels so good, but then he'll like see someone like either get up or go to the bathroom, or someone with their like falling asleep or their arms crossed, and he won't think about like what's going on in their lives. Maybe they just got broken up with, maybe they got their own things going on, but he just in a sea of laughter, he will see that one person with their arms crossed and be like, what am I doing wrong here? Like, what's going on? And that's what we're talking about here.
Who was that?
Sebastian Maniscalco.
I knew that.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to say that.
I love him. Pretty good. And then we have what David Burns would hilariously call should statements, and he would say, don't should yourself. And that's the belief that things should be a certain way. Yeah. And, if you're saying that, I should always be good, I should always be on time, I should always be, friendly, whatever it is, then whenever you're like slightly off, then you're going to feel like crap about yourself. So you shouldn't really be doing that. And it's almost like that Aristotle quote where he says, you are what you repeatedly do. That means that you are like the good things that you do most of the time. That doesn't mean that he's not saying you are what you always do 100% of the time. It's like you are what you repeatedly do. So like the decisions that you try to make most of the time, like if you have a diet, if as long as you're good on it, like 80-90% of the time, you're okay. You don't need to be 100% all the time.
It's funny because like almost every scenario we give almost connects to like another distortion that we're going to get into, because that one's an example I would give for the next one too. With should statements, this one I definitely found myself being guilty of quite frequently until we learned about it, and then I worked on that a little bit. But and I'll always tell people now, like there is no such thing as should. It's either you will, you won't, you did, you didn't. And then you move on. You have to have acceptance of that. The should is that regret. It's that just clinging to the things that I should have done it this way. I should have done it that way. I should have said this. I should have said that. You didn't though. and guess what? There's nothing you can do to change that at this point, except for think about what you can do now to move forward that will improve your situation, or just move past whatever it was. But thinking about the shoulds is just clinging to regret.
That's a great sort of word to use, regret. I appreciate using that, because if you ever read that book Tuesdays with Morrie, there's a time where he talks about like this guy's like, hey, do you ever like regret the things that you wish you had done, or you didn't ask that girl, or you didn't take that dance, or whatever it was. And then the guy, he's dying, right? He's, months away from dying and he knows it. And he's like, I don't regret anything. Why would I do that? Like, why would I spend my time in regret? It's like, I did what I did and my life needs to move forward, right? I mean, that's not to say that like, if you do something heinous, you shouldn't regret it. But I mean, if you live your life the best you can and you made some mistakes here and there, like why would you ever dwell on that? Like I am where I am and things are okay,
Yeah.
Things are okay.
I just have a quick one to share about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I worked with this guy who was an ex addict, and he was getting very, very paranoid over time. This is completely sober. Had a lot of stuff going on, a lot of health issues. His anxiety was through the roof. He would constantly say, like, if I knew sobriety was going to feel this terrible, I never would have got sober. But he had he would say it kind of like with a smirk on his face, because he never had any intention to go back. But his paranoia was like really getting to him. And then one day he shares with me all these like really not great things he did while he was using. And I'm talking about like, I was like, wow, all right, no wonder why you're paranoid. And I was like, you must feel this stuff must be just weighing you down, like the way you feel about this stuff. He goes, I don't care. He's like, I'm just afraid one of these people is going to come back and shoot me one day. But I was like, wow, all right.
Yeah, that's
It just
different.
kind of threw me for a loop because I was like thinking, he was like kind of confessing these things and like telling me this in like a way like I need to get this off my chest. He was more sharing him like anecdotally, and like I sort of appreciated that view because it was like, damn, like I mean, I'm not gonna say like that I want to have no regret over
Yeah.
things that I feel like are worthy of regret. But like the fact that he can sit there and just say, like, no, it's in the past. It's like, and it was like, you know what? You're right. Like, why beat yourself up constantly over things that are like ages ago, a different version of yourself ago? There's so much time to continue to grow as a person and hopefully, improve and, try to do your best and, hopefully make up for it in some other way.
Well, yeah, I think I think you have to do that though. I mean, depending on like the level, I'm sure there's like a hierarchy of regret, right?
There's
I
a
mean,
couple of things he said there that I
yeah,
would probably regret.
well, because look, that's what that whole book, like Dostoevsky, which is probably the most important like writer ever. I mean, Crime and Punishment is
I
about
love
that.
Crime and Punishment. Yeah.
Yeah, like you know what I mean? Like you may have had your reasons to do something horrible and it may have made sense and it may have been, I don't know, you could have justified it at the time. But when you do something really bad, you do change.
Yeah. I'm still not convinced that he doesn't have some regret and that he's like
Yeah.
confusing it with something else. Like, I mean, he was.
Well, yeah, like
If
maybe
you're
that's his
worried that
way
people
of,
are going to come and shoot you over things you've done
that's a
in your
regret,
past,
right?
that's kind of
That's a
regret.
regret. Yeah, that's a regret in and of itself. Yeah. Boy, I wish these people weren't coming to shoot me.
So the
The
last
king of
one
all.
here.
Yeah, the king. Go ahead, lay it on us, David. This is the king.
This is my favorite one. Yeah.
Feeling when you need, I think.
Yeah. All or nothing thinking. So the thought process that things have to be all one way, all done positively, perfectly, or it's failure, or it's done. There's no point in doing it anymore if it's not. So this impacts so many people.
Yeah.
But I find it really interesting because there is actually a whole community of people whose brains are wired for all or nothing thinking. And that's not something they can necessarily just reframe to get to go away. It's just the way they look at life. And that's people on the autism spectrum, obviously. So for those of us who are not on the autism spectrum, we can still get really stuck in this pattern. And as you were mentioning, you alluded to diets in the last one. All or nothing thinking is the killer of diets.
It's the killer of my gyms too.
Of gyms. Yeah, anything. It's like, because you go in there with this idea of like set in your mind, I'm going to do it this many times a week, or I'm going to like do this diet for this many days in the week. And as soon as you mess up, as soon as you have a moment of, I don't know, you mess up, what's the word I'm looking for? You just
fail.
You fail. I was trying to avoid using the word fail because like you don't really,
because it's not a fail, right? No,
nothing is a failure. Yeah.
But no, even in my own personal life, how many times have I had to read like this book called Tiny Habits to really kind of get this baked in. And even still, it doesn't. Like I like going to the gym. It makes me feel good. But like if I can only go there for a half hour, it doesn't feel like I did it. And I probably won't because I'm like, oh, that's not worth it. And then if you do that enough times,
you just never go.
You just never go. And instead of, even if you went a half an hour every day for 4 days, that's what? That's 2 hours at the gym. And instead of doing that, you spent 0 hours at the gym, and one's way better than the other one.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And that's based on a distortion. I mean, it's just wrong. They're not logical.
The way that I like to think about it is if I do 10 minutes of exercise, that's better than the last week where I did 0 minutes of exercise, right?
100%. And it's a win.
And it's a win. Here's one strategy that I use with individuals, especially those on the spectrum. I try to set goals of something we're going to work on through the week, but I give them a percentage of what we're trying to hit. And the ultimate thing is like, if they came in and they didn't hit that percentage, I'm still going to tell them that's fine. It's not, there's never a failure. We're just going to, hey, you didn't hit that 70% mark. Guess what? We're going to try harder next week.
Mm-hmm.
We still did. We did 50% of it. Wow, that's pretty amazing. I'm really happy with 50%. But next week we're gonna strive for that 70%. We're gonna just kind of kick it up a notch and try to get that 70%. So the whole point I'm trying to drive home to them is that, like, just because we didn't achieve it doesn't mean it's gone. We still are working on that goal. That Daruma doll. Did I shared that with you?
No.
All right. So I believe it's from Japan. I hope it is, because I don't want to say this incorrectly. But they have that New Year's Eve little doll that has the eyes that the pupils aren't drawn in. So they make a wish and they color in one pupil when they make in the wish. And they do this at New Year's Eve or the start of the new year for them. And then when the goal is hit, that's when they color in the second pupil. But if they don't hit that goal, what do you think they do?
They keep it for another year.
They keep it and they try again the next year.
I was I hope they don't have a pile of one-eyed dolls.
No, you just don't give up on the goal. You work harder and you continue to try to work on, and that's the whole point of it, is to, like, drive home that idea that you don't just give up on your goals. You keep working until they happen.
And like that, back to the gym thing, it's pretty, it doesn't sound as irrational, like, oh, if I don't go for an hour, it's nothing. You know what I mean? That's an irrational thing to say. So it's like what you're saying is, like, even if you made it ridiculous, like, if I work out for 2 minutes, it's a win today.
Yeah.
That will get you going, though, because it's like, even if, say you literally only have 2 minutes, which is kind of ridiculous, but that's all you have. That's all you have to do. And you won. You worked out that day. You met your goal. But I bet you, 9 times out of 10, you'll get down for 2 minutes. And then next thing you know, you've been working out for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. Yeah. Right. It just, the act of, making these tasks small enough where, like, you'll get started, you'll do them, and take the willpower and everything out of the equation.
Here's another example of something that gives a lot of people issue with all or nothing thinking, like cleaning. So if it's cleaning your house, cleaning a room, organizing an area, it gets to a point.
Cleaning your body.
Cleaning your butt, sure, I guess. Not really what I was thinking, but it gets to a point where they've let it go for so long that it's so overwhelming, and they're like, I don't think I can do any of it because I'm never going to get this done today. You ever hear people say that? I'm never going to be able to get this done in one day, so I just can't get myself to do it. Well, if you can't get it done in one day, how much can you get done today? Let's set a goal. Break it down. Let's break it down into different steps. How much of that do you want to get done today, and to be able to feel like you accomplished something? And guess what? If you break it up and you set small goals, there might be a chance that, hey, you finish this today and you still have time to do some more. So you get double of what you plan to get done, and that's going to feel great.
It's also important to do that for people too, because this is someone that I've been talking to recently, where, like, he is, he has one of those jobs where, like, you get, like, laid off during the winter, and then whatever. It's kind of like a cycle, but it's like he has so many things he wants to get done in the house, and he's like, I feel like I'm just doing nothing all day, and my wife's looking at me thinking, you're doing nothing. Tons of cognitive distortions going on here, and I'm like, well, if you don't have, like, a goal of what you want to get done in the day, then even if you've done a bunch of things, you're going to be like, was that enough? You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you have this, like, idea of what you could get done, you could be like, oh man, I almost reached that, or oh man, I got all that done today, instead of being like, that did I even do anything? I mean, I got this done, that done, and that done. And if you had said, I got this, I want to do this, this, and this, then you'd feel good about it. But instead, you feel sort of about it because you didn't really have a goal to meet.
Yep.
And working towards that goal, as we know, is an important thing.
Yeah. So that's our list.
The list.
That is our list.
CDs.
I was like, what are you talking about? Yes, CDs, cognitive distortions.
Yep.
There was something we talked about at the beginning. I was like, I want to come back to that. Now I remember. All right, this is totally not related to cognitive distortions. So if you guys have questions about cognitive distortions, hit us up. Just so everyone's familiar, or if you want to access the list that we read off of today of the distortions with the specific wording, because you might find some lists that have like different wording for the phrases themselves, or
Even
the
different names. Yeah, like
different
whatever.
names. That's what I was trying to say. So we got ours off of Therapist Aid, which is a site that I think we utilize kind of frequently. So that cognitive distortions list is from there. If you guys want to print out your own or utilize this at work, feel free. But something I figured we could talk about on air, just because I know sometimes we like to, share some personal stuff about our
Sure.
work life and stuff like that. We were talking about graduating people, and I thought that was a funny conversation because I was sharing with Greg that we have a coworker who graduated somebody and was kind of talking about that a little bit, and then I thought about it, I was like, I've never graduated a patient. And you said, Greg, that you haven't either.
I know. And I was like, are we doing this wrong?
And I guess like this is a little vulnerable for us because like there might be people who strongly feel like you're supposed to. But like one of the things that we've said is like I'm not, we've been saying this forever. Like we're not in this for some like short duration thing. Like I kind of feel like therapy is helpful to people regardless, like of if you're in crisis or you're not. Some people need the space, and I tend to have a lot of patients who utilize the space as like their safe area to talk about whatever it is they need to talk about. And they, over time, I guess that's more of it. It's like they might come in crisis, but then over time they just find it to be a helpful space to help them work through things, and they utilize it that way. So it's like they might space themselves out, like from going like weekly to bi-weekly to
that's for sure.
monthly.
Like a space out is something that happens. But no, look, I mean, how invaluable to have somewhere to go where it's just about you and you don't have to worry about someone needing space after a few minutes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because that's basically what we're providing, right? Like that sounding board where you can kind of be like, this is how I feel about this. Is this what are your thoughts, or like like it's man, that's just feels good.
And if they actually go through something in the future, they know where they can go to talk about it if they need to. So I don't know. I there's no real point to this other than just.
No, look, I get it.
I wanted to hear if like any listeners or or watchers have thoughts about this. I would love to hear some opinions about it. What do you feel about it? Do you feel like it's, I don't know. Do you feel like we're doing something wrong by not setting a graduation for somebody from therapy? Do you need to graduate from therapy in order to be able to utilize therapy? What are people's thoughts? Just wanted to kind of open up that dialogue.
Thoughts on that too. I really would actually.
Yeah. So feel free to hit us up on either social media or email or whatever to let us know. utgnpodcast@gmail.com if you want to email us. Otherwise, it's Unconventional Therapists on all the social medias. But yeah.
Let us know.
Greg, we missed a fan mail, and I blame you.
That's not me. I guess.
I feel like it was read by one of us, and then that message didn't get relayed. So I'm assuming I'm going to make an assumption.
That's got to be me.
I'm going to make a cognitive distortion that was you.
I should be reading them all.
We should be reading them all.
Greg. We should.
No, we usually get an alert when we get them, and I didn't see an alert. And you usually share them. So that's why I say this. Yeah. I'm not just being rude to you. All right. So this was on October 30th from someone in Missouri. Thank you for being awesome. I could say so much. You guys especially do help me through my darker days. I don't know who this is, but I wish I did. I really wish I did. So I just wanted to say thank you for that statement. I wish I knew more. Now I'm intrigued by you. And
to the Ozarks.
Thank you to the Ozarks. The fact that you can share that us doing this can help you through darker days is all I need to hear. That is like so meaningful. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's
the motivation. Like we're not worried about the subscription would be nice, of course, but like just the messages and reviews and everything like that. That's everything. We get a couple people saying like, "Hey, you guys really helped me through something." Bam, motivation.
Yeah,
and it means a ton to us. Keeps us going.
It really does. It really does. So, yeah, Greg, anything else for our listeners?
No, just, tell yourself the stories that are going to make you, make your life better. Don't tell yourself the stories that are going to make you feel like crap.
Mm-hmm.
Tell yourself the right stories, I guess is what I'm saying. Look through the right Instagram filter. And I'll tell you, the right one isn't the one that gives you the puppy dog ears and everything. Is that still a thing people do?
Yeah.
That's a shame.
That's a shame. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. As always, we will see you next week. If you get a chance, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show. Please feel free to leave a rating and a review. Reviews are mainly done on Apple Podcasts, but if you listen from another device, feel free to leave a rating on there. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Have a good one. Talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.
Goodbye. See you. Bye.